"You're lying." The words shot through the courtroom like a bullet, sharp and unexpected. Every head turned, searching for the source of the voice. But no one expected it to come from a child, a 10-year-old boy named Ethan Parker. Small footsteps echoed on the polished floor as Ethan stepped forward, his innocent eyes filled not with fear, but with determination. He raised his finger, pointing directly at the man everyone trusted, and said, "That's not the truth you've been told." The courtroom fell into stunned silence. Judge Judy leaned forward, her sharp gaze piercing through the tension, while attorney Ben Crump lowered his papers, visibly shocked. This wasn't just a child's testimony. It was the key to a truth someone desperately wanted to hide. And today, this child was about to change everything. Can Ethan's testimony save an innocent person from being wrongly convicted? Will he be able to prove the truth against all odds? Stay with us to find out. If you believe in justice and the power of truth, hit the like button, share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. Ethan Parker was an ordinary 10-year-old boy living in a quiet suburb of Chicago. His days were filled with school, video games, and the occasional backyard adventures with his dog, Max. But everything changed one evening when Ethan found himself at the center of a case that would shake the very foundation of justice. The case involved Ethan's neighbor, Michael Harris, a kind-hearted man in his late 30s who had always been like an uncle to Ethan. Michael was accused of a crime he swore he didn't commit, a robbery that had turned violent, leaving a man critically injured. The evidence against him seemed overwhelming: a glove with his fingerprints, surveillance footage showing someone who looked like him near the scene, and a witness claiming to have seen him fleeing. But Ethan knew something no one else did. The night of the crime, Ethan had been up late, sneaking a peek at his favorite superhero show through his bedroom window. From there, he saw someone who looked like Michael leaving the apartment building, but there was something off, something Ethan couldn't forget. The man had a distinct limp, something Michael never had. And more importantly, Ethan noticed a small tattoo on the man's neck, partially hidden by a hoodie. Michael didn't have any tattoos. Ethan tried telling his mom, Sarah Parker, but she dismissed it as a child's imagination. "Let the adults handle it," she'd said, ruffling his hair. But Ethan couldn't shake the feeling. Michael didn't do it. He was sure of it. The trial moved fast, with Judge Judy presiding, a woman known for her sharp wit and no-nonsense approach. On the prosecution side was District Attorney Linda Grayson, a fierce attorney with a record of convictions that made her both respected and feared. Defending Michael was Ben Crump, a lawyer known for fighting against injustice, but even he seemed to struggle under the mountain of evidence. Ethan watched the news reports with growing frustration. No one was seeing what he saw. No one was asking the right questions. The more he watched, the more he realized that sometimes adults miss what's right in front of them. On the third day of the trial, unable to stay silent any longer, Ethan did the unthinkable. He walked into the courtroom alone, clutching his school backpack and his courage. Standing up in front of strangers, facing the judge, lawyers, and an entire courtroom filled with adults, it should have been terrifying. But Ethan wasn't afraid, not when an innocent man's life was at stake. His small voice broke through the tension like a spark in the dark. "You're lying." The entire courtroom froze. Judge Judy's sharp gaze snapped toward him. "Young man, who are you, and what do you think you're doing in my courtroom?" she asked, her voice both stern and curious. Ethan swallowed hard, then spoke with surprising clarity. "My name is Ethan Parker, and I know the truth. Michael didn't do it. I saw something that night, something important." Gasps filled the room. Ben Crump stood up, his expression a mix of shock and hope. "Your Honor, I believe we need to hear what this young man has to say." Judge Judy, after a brief pause, nodded. "Very well, but this better be good, young man." Ethan's heart raced as he stepped forward, clutching the straps of his backpack tighter. He wasn't just a kid anymore, not in this moment. He was the key to saving an innocent man. Ethan took a deep breath as he stood in front of the courtroom. The towering presence of Judge Judy, the intense gaze of the jury, and the stern faces of the attorneys didn't shake him. His voice, though small, carried a weight no one could ignore. "That night," Ethan began, his eyes darting nervously around before landing on Michael Harris, "I was looking out my window. I wasn't supposed to be awake, but I saw someone leaving the building. I thought it was Mr. Harris at first, but—" "But what, young man?" Judge Judy interjected, her tone sharp but filled with curiosity. "It wasn't him," Ethan replied, his voice growing stronger. "The man had a limp, and he had a tattoo on his neck, right here." He pointed just below his ear, "like a small star. Mr. Harris doesn't have that." The courtroom erupted in whispers. Michael's eyes filled with tears, not from fear, but hope. Ben Crump leaned forward, seizing the moment. "Your Honor," Ben said, his voice booming, "this child's testimony could be critical. I request permission to have Ethan officially testify." Judge Judy tapped her gavel. "Order in the court. I'll allow it. But be warned, Mr. Crump, this is highly irregular." As Ethan sat in the witness chair, Ben Crump began his questions gently. "Ethan, are you sure about what you saw?" "Yes, sir," Ethan replied confidently. "I remember because it was weird. Mr. Harris always walked straight. This guy was limping, like his leg hurt." Ben turned to the judge. "Your Honor, the prosecution's case relies heavily on the assumption that Michael Harris was seen fleeing the scene, but Ethan's testimony introduces reasonable doubt. I'd like to request surveillance footage from surrounding areas that may show this individual." Linda Grayson, the prosecutor, shot up from her seat. "Objection, Your Honor. This is a distraction. The child's memory can't be trusted. He's just a kid." Judge Judy's eyes narrowed. "Miss Grayson, sometimes children see what adults overlook. I'm granting Mr. Crump's request." The courtroom buzzed with energy as the new footage was retrieved. Days passed with intense cross-examinations, legal arguments, and rising tension. The footage showed a figure leaving the scene, a man with a noticeable limp, wearing a hoodie that covered most of his face. But there, clear as day, was a faint star tattoo on his neck. Ethan's testimony was the turning point. Ben Crump seized the opportunity, digging deeper. He discovered that a known criminal, Tyrell Mason, had been in the area at the time. Tyrell had a record of robberies and a star tattoo. As more evidence surfaced, including DNA traces from the crime scene that matched Tyrell, the prosecution's case crumbled. But Linda Grayson wasn't backing down. In one final attempt, she called Ethan back to the stand, trying to discredit him. "Ethan," she said with a fake smile, "how do we know you're not just making this up because Mr. Harris is your neighbor?" Ethan sat up straight, his face calm. "Because the truth doesn't change. I saw what I saw, and I'd rather tell the truth, even if no one believes me, than let an innocent man go to jail." The courtroom fell silent. Even Judge Judy, known for her tough exterior, softened for a moment. The courtroom was packed. Tension hung in the air so thick you could almost touch it. Reporters lined the back, scribbling furiously, cameras occasionally flashing to capture the moment. Judge Judy sat with her signature stern expression, tapping her pen against the desk, eyes sharp as a hawk. On one side, Linda Grayson clutched her notes tightly, her confidence visibly shaken. On the other, Ben Crump stood tall, his face set with determination, Michael Harris seated beside him with tired, hopeful eyes. The final witness was called Tyrell Mason, the man whose shadow had haunted Michael's case from the beginning. The courtroom doors creaked open as Tyrell entered, handcuffed, flanked by two officers. He had the same star tattoo on his neck Ethan described. His limp was subtle, but there. The room fell dead silent as he took the stand. Ben Crump approached with calm precision. "Mr. Mason, Do you recognize this man? Ben pointed to Michael Harris. Tyrell smirked. Never seen him before. Interesting, Ben replied, flipping through documents. Because your fingerprints were found at the scene of the crime. Care to explain that? Tyrell's face twitched. Must be a mistake, he muttered, trying to regain composure. Ben leaned in slightly, his voice dropping to a near whisper, yet sharp enough to slice through the tension. No mistake, Mr. Mason, and we also have surveillance footage placing you near the scene, limping, just like you are right now. The room felt like it was holding its breath. Judge Judy leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. Answer the question, Mr. Mason, she barked. Tyrell's bravado crumbled. His hands fidgeted in the cuffs, beads of sweat forming on his brow. Finally, under the crushing weight of the evidence, he snapped. All right, it was me, okay? He blurted out, his voice echoing off the courtroom walls. I broke in, but I didn't mean to kill him. It was an accident. Gasps erupted around the room. Michael's eyes welled with tears, relief washing over him like a wave. Ben Crump stood still, letting the confession hang in the air, the truth finally breaking free from the chains of lies and injustice. Judge Judy banged her gavel, her voice cutting through the chaos. Order, order in the court. She turned to Tyrell, her tone sharp and unrelenting. You've just confessed to a crime in open court. Bailiff, take him away. As Tyrell was dragged out, still muttering under his breath, Judge Judy's gaze shifted to Michael Harris. For once, her face softened slightly. Mr. Harris, she said, you've been wrongfully accused, and I'm deeply troubled by how this case was handled. She turned to Ben Crump. Excellent work, counselor. Michael's knees buckled slightly as the weight of his nightmare finally lifted. Ben caught him, patting his back gently. Across the room, Ethan's mother hugged her son tightly, tears streaming down her face. The courtroom slowly emptied, but the echoes of Tyrell Mason's confession lingered like a ghost. Michael Harris sat silently at the defense table, his face a mix of exhaustion and disbelief. For the first time in years, he wasn't fighting to prove his innocence. It had been proven for him. Ben Crump helped him to his feet, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. You're a free man, Michael, Ben said softly. It's over. Michael shook his head slowly. It doesn't feel real. It will, Ben replied, one day at a time. Outside the courthouse, a crowd had gathered, reporters, supporters, and people who'd followed the case. As Michael and Ben stepped out, the flash of cameras exploded like fireworks. Microphones were shoved toward them, voices overlapping with questions. Michael, how does it feel to be free? Do you blame the justice system for what happened? Mr. Crump, will there be a lawsuit against the prosecution? Ben raised a hand, calming the crowd. Today isn't about lawsuits or blame, he said firmly. Today is about justice finally being served. Michael Harris was wrongfully accused, and it took the courage of a child and the determination of truth to set him free. That's the story. Michael took a shaky breath, stepping forward. I lost years of my life to a crime I didn't commit, he said, his voice raw with emotion. But I gained something too. I saw what real courage looks like. In Ben Crump, in Judge Judy, who gave me a fair chance, and in Ethan, who had the guts to tell the truth when no one else would. Ethan and his mother stood in the crowd, tears streaming down their faces. Michael caught Ethan's eye and gave him a small, grateful nod. Ethan smiled, shyly ducking his head. Days turned into weeks. Michael adjusted to freedom, relearning simple joys, walking without handcuffs, feeling the sun without bars between him and the sky. Ben Crump continued to fight cases like his, using Michael's story as a beacon of hope. Judge Judy's ruling became a landmark moment, quoted in legal discussions and news outlets nationwide. It wasn't just another case. It was a reminder that justice isn't always about who shouts the loudest, but about who speaks the truth. Months had passed since Michael Harris walked out of that courtroom a free man. Life was different now, not perfect, but filled with a sense of peace he'd long forgotten. He found work at a local community center, helping kids who, like him, had grown up in neighborhoods where the justice system felt more like an enemy than an ally. One afternoon, while Michael was organizing books for an after-school program, a familiar voice called out from the doorway. "Hey, Mr. Harris." Michael turned to see Ethan, now a little taller, his shy smile still the same. His mother stood behind him, pride shining in her eyes. "Ethan." Michael grinned, walking over. "Look at you, getting taller every day." Ethan shrugged, his grin widening. "I wanted to say, thank you for being brave. You helped me be brave too." Michael knelt down to Ethan's level. "You saved my life, kid," he said softly. "Don't ever forget that." Later that evening, Michael sat on his porch, watching the sunset. He thought about the trial, the courtroom, and Judge Judy's firm voice delivering justice. He thought about Ben Crump's unwavering belief in him, and Ethan's courage. Justice hadn't come easy. It never did. But it had come. Michael picked up a pen and started writing, a letter to men and women still waiting, still hoping, still fighting. "The truth has a voice," he wrote. "Sometimes it's a lawyer, sometimes it's a judge, and sometimes it's an 8-year-old boy who refuses to be silent." If this story moved you, share your thoughts in the comments. Do you believe in the power of truth, even when the odds are against you? Hit the like button, subscribe for more powerful stories, and never forget, justice may be delayed, but it can never be denied when voices rise together.